Hello and welcome into the PHNX Cardinals podcast, emergency podcast brought to you by the DraftKings Sportsbook app, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. I'm Johnny Venerable, joined by Bo Brock. Breaking news, DeAndre Hopkins, all-pro wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals, has been suspended, Bo, for 6 games to begin the 2022 season for performance-enhancing drugs. Via multiple reports, he is not appealing the suspension. He will serve it and miss 6 games, forfeit $4 million in the process. Good hell. Where do we begin?
Just a brutal blow for the Arizona Cardinals, their 2022 season. You can talk about trying to replace the production of Christian Kirk, of Chandler Jones, of Chase Edmonds, but this is the single most crushing blow to the 2022 Arizona Cardinals, DeAndre Hopkins being out for 6 games. I mean, you look at the production and the team and how it performed with Nuke in the lineup in 2021, 8-2, 8 red zone touchdowns from DeAndre Hopkins, and then him not in the lineup, 3 and 4 down the stretch, and just pedestrian to below average in the red zone. It just wasn't good enough. Now, did they supplement enough this offseason in order to make up for DeAndre Hopkins being out? I mean, it's tough to replace no matter what your roster looks like. I don't care if it's the NFC Pro Bowl team.
Yeah. A lot of people are wondering, we don't have a definitive word on if Steve Keim and company knew this was coming, hence the moves that they made over the weekend. I would expect that played a part in it, and they did know once upon a time. They knew about Patrick Peterson's suspension well in advance. The Hollywood Brown acquisition becomes that much more important, not only for the future, but in 2022. He will begin the season for the first 6 weeks at least, Bo, as the number 1 receiving option for Kyler Murray. How quickly can you get Trey McBride up and running, making A.J. Green a priority to bring back? That now makes much more sense. They do have Rondell Moore. They do have Zach Ertz. Let's first talk about, DeAndre Hopkins' first year with the Arizona Cardinals, phenomenal, all-pro. It was the trade for David Johnson. And then he organized and extended his contract. And Bo, after missing 8 of 10 to end last year, he's going to miss 6 games this year. He's due $30 million in 2023. What does this do on Hopkins' future with the Arizona Cardinals?
It's very reminiscent. It's very eerie of the Patrick Peterson saga. When things just kind of started to spiral out of control, when they're model teammates, model citizens, they're star players, they're guys that you think that is part of the solution and part of the guys that you would build around. And I'm not completely taking DeAndre Hopkins out of the equation because of this, but it's the first kind of strike against DeAndre Hopkins, and him at 29 years old, very similar to P2 back then. It's kind of similar age. And then you're right. I mean, as far as how much he's going to be due, as far as what his cap hit looks like next year, I mean, the Arizona Cardinals could be in a tough spot with DeAndre Hopkins. It's just, like I said, it's the biggest blow of the 2022 offseason, and how they move forward from here. I don't think that they knew about this. I don't. I mean, from at least Hollywood Brown had no clue about it because he was excited to work alongside DeAndre Hopkins. Now, Hollywood Brown, he was kind of playing, I don't know, dumb the whole time about how long he knew about the trade and stuff like that. So it's not like he can't keep a secret. But I'd find it tough for anybody to be able to sit on that news or know anything about this before today.
Anybody ripping the acquisition of Hollywood Brown, the price that the Arizona Cardinals paid, that being a first-round pick and getting a third back in return, I would imagine that teams, knowing the Cardinals in the position that they are, would be much more susceptible to ask for more. And maybe the Cardinals would have pivoted. I feel like they had to have known or gotten whispers that this was coming. Otherwise, maybe you have a gut reaction to sign a free agent. I don't think they're going to sign a free agent, Bo. It just doesn't make sense to bring in what's your selling card? You're going to bring in somebody for 6 weeks and then you're not going to be a part of the offense. We were talking about it, goodness, last night when we recorded, this is the best receiving core in recent memory for the Cardinals. And now, yes, this is a definitive blow. And I tweeted this out before we went live. This is why you pay Kyler Murray $43 million if you intend to, which Steve Keim did confirm today on Adam Schein's podcast. The Cardinals are basically going to start the negotiations now. So if that's your rationale, Cliff Kingsbury got an extension, say with what you will. He's a great first half coach. And then Kyler Murray is going to be a franchise top 5 to 7 quarterback. You would expect those two to need to be at the top of their game. You can also couple that by the fact that the season doesn't start for another 4.5, 5 months. You've got time now to put game plans together, like once upon a time when this team went to San Francisco and didn't have Hop or Kyler Murray, or went to Seattle and beat Seattle on the road. I do think there's enough time, especially now with the new dynamic of this offense, the new layers that Trey McBride and company bring. Maybe you can go a little bit more run heavy early on. You can mix in the play action and RPOs with Kyler Murray when his legs are fresh during the beginning of the season. Is it ideal? Of course not. But the excuse making that I've seen a lot of people make on Twitter that they think the front office is going to make. No, I mean, like, they're going to go out and expect to win those first 6 games, and they're going to be in a better position to do that without Hopkins than they were at the end of the season last year when they missed him abruptly. He was out, and then Kingsbury went on the record to say, I did not do a good enough job in, accommodating the rest of the team when Hopkins was out. Well, Cliff, now you have ample time to do that. You've got 5 months. You've got a plethora of weapons still remaining. You've got a receiver who a lot of people think, we were just talking about Hollywood Brown could potentially be a 1,200-yard receiver. He was Lamar Jackson's number 1.
Right.
So why can't he be Hopkins' number 1 for 6 weeks plus?
Sure. I mean, it just makes things a lot harder. And it also, as far as I think that the Arizona Cardinals between the 20s, they can move the football. As far as in the red zone, especially the passing attack, DeAndre Hopkins is such a large part of that. But you bring back Zach Ertz, you draft Trey McBride, Hollywood Brown. He's got the quickness. He can certainly be a factor down there. And of course, James Conner brings back his 18 touchdowns. But look, this is just going to be you're going to have to ride with Antoine Wesley, I apologize, as far as playing kind of that same role that he did at the end of the season. And we saw that, look, he's fine. He can make a play here and there, but he's just not that steady, consistent. Ball goes up, ball comes down in the hands of DeAndre Hopkins, that special type of player. It's just the Arizona Cardinals. Now, here's the thing. Kyler Murray, as you mentioned, Adam Shine's radio show today on Mad Dog Sports with Steve Keim, that they're working on the extension. Now Kyler Murray has to prove that he can elevate this team with the absence of DeAndre Hopkins, because he couldn't do it last year, as we've laid out here. He couldn't do it last year. And Cliff Kingsbury as well. He took a bunch of the blame as well. He was candid about it. He was transparent. He was humble about it, about how he didn't adjust well enough without DeAndre Hopkins. Now is his chance to prove, that he can do it. He has to, because they don't have any other options. There's no wiggle room. The margin for error is gone, and it's unfortunately by self-inflicted wound by one of their star players in DeAndre Hopkins getting popped.
Rafa in the chat, D-Hop is 50% of our offense. I don't disagree that that's how it's been, but to Bo's point, Kyler Murray needs to be the offense. He needs to be the catalyst, the driving force. Everybody else is complementary, right? You can have different dynamics of your offense, Pro Bowl or running back in James Conner, a couple quality pass-catching tight ends, a speedster on the outside in Hollywood Brown, Rondell Moore in year 2. Like, the cupboard is not bare. I would argue after the Hollywood Brown with Baltimore, people are asking, well, what are they going to do at receiver? But nobody's, banging the drum that they need to start over and they're not going to be a playoff team. I think it's just, again, public perception of how this team finished at the end of last year after losing DeAndre Hopkins. The Cardinals were averaging over 30 points per game with him and under 20 points per game when he exited the lineup. I want to remind everybody, the NBA playoff is nonstop at the DraftKings Sportsbook app, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. This week, new customers can bet $5 on any team to win and get $150 in free bets if they do. Looking to turn a small bet into a big payday during the NBA playoffs? Why? DraftKings same-game parlays can do just that. Create your own parlay by combining multiple bets like which team will win, total threes made, total rebounds, and more, and boom, you have your shot at an even bigger payout. Right now, all customers can bet a same-game parlay with 3 or more legs and get a free bet up to $25 if one leg doesn't hit. It's a call to action. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PHNX, bet $5 on any NBA team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. That's promo code PHNX at the DraftKings Sportsbook app. 21 and over, Arizona only. Gambling problem, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP. New customer only. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Get to some of these comments here. We'll be back later to break down the draft class. Also, this news sucks. Luckily, it's not that long. D-Hop will be back when AJ starts to tail off, too. And I think that's the common practice. We will have another show, likely tomorrow, breaking down the draft class. But to your point goes, the Cardinals play their best football at the beginning of the season. Now, Hopkins is a big part of that. But this you have time to diversify your offense. You have time to put game plans together. And I think that's where a lot of people are a little bit fearful, Bo, is you got to have the best versions of Cliff and Kyler. And Kyler's shown he can do it, but can Cliff Kingsbury put together 6 consecutive game plans without his number one? And, are we going to get a really quick crash course into, was this contract extension for Cliff Kingsbury worth it or not?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to learn right away, and he's shown coming out of the gates that he can be a terrific game schemer, and even with him not on the sidelines, we saw what he was able to put together against the Cleveland Browns. And yeah, I see that, Pedro, could be a breakout season for more. I mean, people have to step up, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be beyond Marquise Hollywood Brown and AJ Green kind of carrying the load here. It's going to be huge for the Arizona Cardinals to get production out of their wide receiver core, and it stretches beyond those guys. This is what's going to be very key for the Arizona Cardinals next week. A week from this Thursday is the schedule release, and people sometimes poo-poo that date because we know the opponents at this point, but it's going to be key to see who those first 6 games are against, because it could be a murderer's row. I mean, if you get the Chiefs, if you get a bulk of your AFC West opponents in that matchup, if you get the Los Angeles Rams, you could be sitting in a very undesirable spot 6 games through the season, like just depending on how your schedule looks when it's rolled out and unveiled on May 12th, next Thursday. I mean, it's going to be very important to see, what it's going to look like, because, it doesn't matter about like cold games. It's just going to matter about the caliber of the opponent that they're going to face.
DeAndre Hopkins is scheduled to make, as a cap hit this year, it's $17,950,000. It jumps up in 2023 to just under 31 million, and then in 2024, 24 million. Now, the $1 million question, or the $30 million question, would be the Cardinals were opting to move off of him in a potential opt-out in 2023. They would incur $18 million in dead cap, assuming they couldn't trade him. Now, I think DeAndre Hopkins crushes it in the last 11 games of the season. They're not going to look to move off of him. I think it's premature.
Sure.
Now, it's not ideal when you talk about a quarterback that's going to be expensive, a left tackle who needs to be extended, a number one cornerback, a safety, maybe a defensive lineman in Zach Allen. The Cardinals need to pay other people, Hollywood Brown, for instance. So, DeAndre Hopkins, I feel like they want him around. And somebody just made a great point in the chat that I didn't even put 2 and 2 together until I saw it. Andy Isabella has not been traded yet. He hasn't been cut yet. Does he find new life with this move? There are so many different layers, none of them fun. I don't like any of these layers, but there are so many different layers to this story when you think about the trickle down effect. But the number one thing I take away from it is Kyler Murray, franchise tone setter, winner, has to come out and play his best football of his career. Otherwise, the Cardinals aren't going to have a good season. If everybody puts their head down and buckles under pressure, then it will torpedo the season, but it doesn't have to.
Right. I see Rashad there. Go sign Julio and Fuller. Give them $8 million, 2 year and a void year. He's getting cap crazy there. He's trying to manipulate the cap like he's their salary cap specialist. But I agree with you. I don't think that they're going to go out in there and make a move when you look at who's in house already and who they trust. And man, it's. Do you agree with me when I say that's the biggest blow as far as this offseason is concerned? I want to get away from the Andy Isabella talk because I don't buy.
Yeah,
I mean, he had one catch last year. He had an opportunity with the absence of Nuke last year.
It is the biggest blow thus far. Is it the biggest blow this team could have sustained? No, that would have been Kyler Murray. If Kyler Murray had missed the first 6 games of the season, you're in huge trouble. You're talking about having to potentially sign somebody else.
Oh, don't say that to the Colt McCoy truthers out there.
I get it. But here's the thing, and we touched on it a little bit, like in preparation for this draft, because it was all about supplementing what the Cardinals didn't have and getting younger at the skill players. And we brought up the fact that DeAndre Hopkins is going to be 30 years old. Typically at 30 years old, guys start to deteriorate physically. That's why they're available, right? That's why Amari Cooper was cut and Dallas only got a 5th round pick. At the end of the day, is this the beginning of the end for DeAndre Hopkins when Patrick Peterson saw his suspension for PEDs? He was 29. He was never the same player. I'm not saying that Hopkins can't be effective and they won't keep him around after 2022. But there is a reason. You can understand now, especially if Keim and company had word, and I believe that they knew to some degree this was coming from the league office. Hollywood Brown is 24 years old, and they traded him for a 1st-round pick, which means they believe he can be a number 1 receiver. Trey McBride is 22 years old, and they believe he can be a Pro Bowl tight end. That's the future of the Arizona Cardinals offense, with all
Sure.
due respect to DeAndre Hopkins.
I mean, 12 personnel is looking pretty good right now. When
It
you
is.
get those 2 tight ends on the field, you've got 2 wide receivers. It can be Hollywood Brown and AJ Green, or Hollywood Brown and Rondell Moore, or Hollywood Brown and Antoine Wesley with Trey McBride and Zach Ertz. I'm sure that's what they've discussed, whenever they got word about the suspension from DeAndre Hopkins. And yeah, absolutely. They might have known about that. I see Pedro. Should they take a shot at Dez? Absolutely not. Dez Bryant is done. His days of being an impactful receiver in the league. And some people hit me up on Twitter. They got in my mentions talking about how he could be a leader. In what universe has Dez Bryant ever been a locker room
talking
leader?
About the same Dez?
Yeah, I have no clue, because I've never known him to be a guy that's kind of rallying the troops and sculpting young minds as far as the wide receiver position, except for complaining about his targets. That's not the right direction to go for the Arizona Cardinals. If they want to kick the tires on a guy like Julio Jones, absolutely. But I doubt that they're going to do that.
Why do you think DeAndre Hopkins withdrew his appeal? Like, I think about okay, you're a first-time offender, we think. It's just like I was talking about a pre-show with our producers. Like, if you get in an accident or you get arrested, right, typically things go easier for you if you don't have any prereqs, right? No pre-existing arrests or anything like that. Like, I can't think why on earth you wouldn't just say, well, my bad, didn't mean to, it was a mistake, and try to get that down from 6 to 4. I don't understand that.
I don't either. Do you see this in any way? Can you look at it from a glass half full perspective? Go ahead. 6 games in the season, depending on when your bye week is, it could be week 7, week 8, whatever, that you could get a fresh DeAndre Hopkins back in the lineup, and you could have a team that's more geared towards, playing at the right time when we want to see this team play its best football.
100%. He's coming off injury. He will be on the team this year. And the Cardinals traded for Kenyon Drake once upon a time, Marcus Golden and Zach Ertz, and implemented them within the game plan the same week. So I don't have an issue, and I don't have concerns about Hopkins coming back and being plugged right into the lineup. And who knows? You just mentioned it. Maybe they get a break and their bye week hits within the first 6 weeks of the season. And does he miss 6 weeks or 6 games? Is it 6 games?
He missed 6 games, yes.
Okay, so never mind. Yeah. Forget exactly what I just said, because it didn't make a damn bit of sense. I'm emotional right now. I want to remind everybody, go PHNX.com. We're going to have content. We're going to have coverage of this news continue as we get more information. I can't even talk. It's so frustrating. Under $60 if you want to become a member at gophnx.com. $8.99 if you want to go monthly with 99 cents for the first month. Bo's got an article dropping about the plethora of riches that the Cardinals we thought had after the draft. But of course, this DeAndre Hopkins situation throws a wrench in it. You can also check out the PHNX merchandise locker. Get this phenomenal cap. I've got my hat. I've got my Tucson tee right here. PHNX Wildcats. We're not suspended here at PHNX. We continue with our coverage, Bo. The comments are coming in fast and furious. Blaine says we would go 4-2, 5-1 with Colt. I would disagree with that. I would say that Colt McCoy without DeAndre Hopkins is probably looking at 2-4 at best, in my opinion.
I mean, he's a quintessential backup. He can win you 3 games. He's going to lose you 3 games as well. I mean, to look at that 3-3 would be the ceiling for a guy like Colt McCoy. I mean, you have to think we saw him 3 times in the game against Carolina. People forget about how bad that was. That was brutal performance.
And they didn't play with a lead, and he had to play from behind, and it was a bloodbath. A lot of people saying Julio Jones is not going to come here and play and understand that his role is going to be diminished after 6 weeks. Like AJ Green's been in this office for a year. You got to trust he's going to be able to help you. Hollywood Brown is going to be their number 1 receiver. AJ Green had over 800 yards last year. Rondell Moore was I think a top 50 pick last year. He needs to ball out for you. His route tree needs to be expanded. They gave Zach Ertz big money. They have a Pro Bowl running back that scored 20 plus touchdowns last year. Like, there are options. 18. There are options to be had. The cupboard is not bare. But like anything else, people have to step up. AJ Green cannot turn into a vegetable again, right? Rondale Moore cannot have the garbage route tree that he had last year where he was averaging like 2 yards per reception at the end of the season. Hollywood Brown and Kyler Murray, their love fest on social media needs to translate to the field, right? All
Right.
those things have to happen if the Cardinals want to come out of this unscathed.
Well, I think that remains true even now, even more so. It just rings a little bit more heavier than it did before. I mean, that the Arizona Cardinals, especially with the painfully slow free agency period, really no deals outside of the Hollywood Brown deal. They needed their stars to step up and play like stars. The guys that they chose to retain, and then the guys that they let go walk, or they have to show up and they have to show out. Ertz, as you mentioned, James Conner, like they have to be the same. And you have to find now, I think it becomes imperative, especially on the offensive side of the football, to find a change of pace guy that can roll with James Conner.
Yeah,
like
agreed.
I just don't think Keontae Ingram will be the solution there. Let him come
Not
to camp and battle. But as far as the two guys that you have playing behind James Conner, I don't think it's good enough. And maybe you go check out Darrell Williams, or you check out who else is on the free agent market, or you check out the trade market. I mean, the Rams running back room was completely depleted before the start of the season. They were able to kind of hold their head above water. They make the trade for Sony Michel. You might have to put yourself in a similar position. You got that extra third round pick with the compensation potentially next year for Christian Kirk. So it's really going to be an opportunity for Steve Keim to take a shot at bolstering his running back room before training camp starts, which I will say, speaking of taking a shot, it's time for some screenshots presented by Arizona Department of Health Services. COVID-19 vaccines are free for everyone 5 and older. Those 12 and older are also now eligible for a booster. Let's do the right thing and keep everyone safe as we get together to watch the Suns playoff action. They're in action tonight, game 1 against the Mavericks. Visit azhealth.gov for a location near you.
Thank God for the Phoenix Suns. As we trudge along here, PHNX_Cardinals on Twitter. Give us a follow. DeAndre Hopkins suspended for the first 6 games of the season. Will not appeal. It is definitive. Kyler Murray is going to get a new contract, we believe, this summer. Steve Keim, Adam Shine said earlier today they're putting all their attention toward that now. So it's Kyler Murray that has to carry the weight. It's Kyler Murray who has to show he's a top 5 quarterback. Once upon a time, in his MVP season, I use Cam and Kyler in a lot of contexts because they were both number 1 picks. They were polarizing. They lifted up franchises that had reached rock bottom, right? Cam didn't have a number 1 receiver that year. He, won his MVP. I'm thinking back to a lot of these MVPs of years prior, and, you have to be able to spread the ball around. And again, if Kingsbury hadn't made it such a priority that, we cannot be so DeAndre Hopkins dependent this offseason, I would feel worse about this, but I honestly do feel like everybody's going to go into camp and it's going to be up for grabs. Like, you're going to have to earn your targets, right? Everybody needs to be able to step up and come to play the first 6 weeks of the season in the passing game to be able to supplement the loss of what we think is a potential Hall of Fame receiver. So AJ Green, we need your best. Hollywood Brown, pick up the playbook, learn it as fast as you can because you're our default number 1. Again, if this had happened somehow, let's say Hopkins tore something in training camp and he missed the first 6 games of this regular season, and he had been practicing with the ones and taking all those viable reps, and then you had to just kind of insert guys left and right, and everybody had to go up a chain on the totem pole. That, in my opinion, would be much more detrimental. You get a 4.5, 5-month head start now. To your point, Bo, you likely get him now for the last 11 games of the season, fully healthy, fully rested. Things could be much worse. I still think they're a playoff team. I still think they overcome it.
Here's why I'm concerned about that, because even when DeAndre Hopkins was in the lineup regularly, I mean, he was getting out targeted at points by Christian Kirk, AJ Green. Him being a decoy out there was nearly as important as him out there making plays. So not only does Kyler have to learn to play without DeAndre Hopkins, those other wide receivers have to learn to play without him. And, I'm not concerned so much about Hollywood Brown because he's taken the brunt of pass coverages in his career so far, being kind of the only legit deep threat for the Baltimore Ravens, being in a pass-heavy or run-heavy offense with Baltimore, and taking advantage of his, lower quantity of targets. But, as far as Moore and AJ Green and Zach Ertz, like those guys are going to have to find ways to get open when the opposing defense kind of emphasizes them instead of DeAndre being out there, even though he wasn't making big plays. You didn't see a big yardage game from DeAndre Hopkins in 2021, but you saw when it was most important within the 20s, he shined. He was the guy making plays for the Arizona Cardinals, and they've got to figure that out. It's going to be imperative for the success of this team. And if we talked about Colt McCoy, we joke about it, but one thing Kyler can really take away from Colt McCoy, maybe as they get closer to the season, is how well Colt McCoy distributed the football.
Yeah.
Just really got the ball in his playmakers' hands, in Hollywood Brown's hands, in Rondell Moore's hands, and Zach Ertz's hands. Remember, he hit Zach Ertz for 2 touchdowns in Seattle. We didn't really see Kyler kind of zero in on Zach Ertz in the red zone like Colt did. And I think that's one thing you can take away from McCoy that Kyler can certainly add to his game.
A couple comments I want to get to here. Larry Fitzgerald's enjoying his time in retirement, even though he won't admit
he'd have
retired.
A negative yak if he came back.
He would. Let's focus on the guys they have in house, because Bo and I both agree they're not going to bring anybody of substance in. The receiving core is mostly set. I think Rashad has a great point here. To be real, none of this will be that big of a deal if we're able to run the ball consistently like we did early last year. And I would say even hearkening back to Kyler Murray's first year in Arizona when they didn't have DeAndre Hopkins and they became a dominant running team with Kenyon Drake and company. That's how they won games that year offensively. Eric Cross saying, besides saying guys need to step up, do we need to make any wide receiver acquisitions? I don't think so. It would shock me if they made a move. I think because, again, the season is 17 plus games. If you're, hoping to make the playoffs, it is not 6 games. And so, yeah, you would love to have Jarvis Landry for the first 6 games of the regular season, or somebody like Will Fuller healthy. But I mean, like, what happens, right? Those guys understand Hopkins is coming back. AJ Green's on this team, making $3 million. Rondell Moore has to have a role. If Rondell Moore doesn't have a role next year, then it's a wasted pick, right? Hollywood Brown's the number 1 wide receiver for this team in 2022 for the first 6 weeks. And then you've got 2 bona fide and, in my opinion, stud pass catching tight ends without seeing Trey McBride play a snap in the NFL. I really do believe that. So it would be a luxury that you would love to have. It is not realistic, Bo, to think about bringing in somebody of note, because they have to be willing to sign with you, and they would have to understand on a 1-year deal that they could max. Like if you're Jarvis Landry, you would probably rather go to some place like Baltimore or a team that doesn't have a ton of receiver talent. The Giants, maybe. The Cardinals were talked about as having the best skill players in the NFL before this news. Yes, it's a huge blow with no DeAndre Hopkins, but lean on your strength, right? Lean on the guys that remain. And, we're not even talking about the defense yet. The defense in large stretches of the beginning of last year, outside of the Minnesota game, carried this team. Tennessee, Jacksonville, Byron Murphy's pick 6, like Cleveland, the defense set the tone in a lot of games. Now, you're missing Chandler Jones, but, it sounds cliche to say, Bo, but it has to really be a team effort to get through this, because you can't be reliant now on one guy.
Sure, and I think it adds to Kyler Murray the pressure of maybe getting out and running more too. I mean, I think that if you
better
say
get a new contract before that happens,
right? But where has he been most effective running the football? That's in the early season. I mean, that's really before he gets dinged up and before he wants to not absorb as many hits. I mean, double-digit touchdowns in 2020, and then early on, I thought that he was making more plays with his legs last season before he got dinged up. He had the ankle injury. If you can get, peak running Kyler, I mean, I'd love to see what a prop bet looks like on DraftKings as far as what his rushing total is this season over under, because I think early on, like, he could boost their offense by just getting out and utilizing his legs. I just love to see it. I don't think he did it enough. Obviously, he was dealing with that ankle injury, but that would help supplement this offense a little bit more, and also let guys like Hollywood Brown, who are already used to it playing with Lamar Jackson, finding the open space on the football field and then making big plays once his quarterback gets out of the pocket there.
Just going to give us an update via the DraftKings Sportsbook app as it relates to the Cardinals over-under, which before today was 9.5. They were minus 110 to make the playoffs. To nobody's surprise, it looks like all that information has been removed from the DraftKings
Off the
Sportsbook app.
board, huh?
Off the board right now. I cannot find their over/under win totals. Now, if you're a fan of gambling, which we are, and the many props via the DraftKings Sportsbook app, typically no singular player in Vegas outside a quarterback is worth more than 1 point. So if that line moves, I would not expect it to move drastically, especially before we know, Bo, when and how the schedule is going to play out. We will get the schedule in the coming weeks here. We know the Cardinals have to play the AFC West, and they play in the NFC West, so it's not going to be easy. Give us your final thoughts, Bo, if you can, on just how this affects Kyler Murray, his contract negotiations, and his outlook in 2022, because that's really going to make or break the season.
Yeah, it puts the even more pressure on the young quarterback's shoulders, and it's going to emphasize him elevating the talent on this team. If he goes in, if he secures the bag finally before they start to line up for the 2022 season, he's got to be confident that he's going to be good to go. He's going to be secure in his future as the Arizona Cardinals signal caller to go out there and kind of take on this role. He doesn't have a Robin any longer. It's just Batman out there. It's the Christopher Nolan series. There's no Robin in this one. It's just Kyler out there, and he's going to have to make plays and he's not short on playmakers. I don't think that it's a big enough excuse that they can't win football games. I think Steve Keim has done a good job in putting him in a position to succeed without DeAndre Hopkins, whether he knew or didn't know before last week, and they made the trade for Hollywood Brown. But yeah, that duo has to show that they can be the duo going forward, because DeAndre Hopkins he's a little bit long in the tooth as far as the NFL goes. I saw, what was it, WD-40, roids and a knee injury. What's going to be interesting to me to see is if this is the same thing. I mean, Patrick Peterson's production, his play fell off a cliff after his pop.
Yeah.
Like, it took him a long time. What was it, 2018? Was it 2019? Kyler's rookie year? I mean, that defense was atrocious. It wasn't much better when he got back. He had to knock a lot of rust off and kind of relearn how to play. And, DeAndre Hopkins seemed like he was immortal. And now, does he come back? Does he look very moral when he gets back in the lineup? That's going to be another thing. Like, are you going to get the real D-Hop back when the time comes, when the 6 games is over?
If you don't, then that 2023 $30 million salary becomes that much more easy to potentially move off of. And we'll have plenty of time to discuss Hopkins and his legacy as somebody who is typically thought of as somebody that's going to have a gold bronze bust in Canton one day. If that is seemingly out the window, we do have a new partner in the house. I want to remind everybody we're excited to welcome OG's brand to the PHNX family. OG's is one of Arizona's first original scratch-made cannabis kitchens, and is dedicated to creating innovative and memorable cannabis-infused products that flavor life's journey. The quality of their products stem from the combination of accurate dosing, amazing flavor. Edibles are not just a one-size-fits-all product, which is why OG's is proud to offer a wide variety of products for all demos and preferences. Their motto is flavor in life. That's something we can all get behind. Goodness, we could all use an OG's right now after this move. I love the pina colada, Saul, the GM orange creamsicle guy, the gummies, all that good stuff. Check it out. If you're interested in trying the amazingly delicious variety of flavors that OG Brands has to offer, go to ogbrands.com. That's ogbrands.com to find an OG's nearest to you. Man, we had a bunch of fun stuff to talk about today. Cardinals getting aces across the board, mostly for their draft output, their grades. We will save all that for tomorrow. For Bo Brock, I'm Johnny Venerable. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. We appreciate the influx of support. Mr. Bo Brock.
Can we just say, I mean, we really haven't said it. We've danced around it, but what the fuck? What happened? What are we doing?
What are we doing indeed? Well, here on PHNX Cardinals, we're keeping it live, content 365. We're not suspended. We're here. We'll be back tomorrow, 4 p.m. We'll bring back Damian Anderson. Poor bastard was scheduled with us today. Then Mr. Hopkins gets his suspension. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.